Journey to the Past, Chapter 2, Part 2. It takes Izuku a while to ask them. He's thought about the questions he wants to ask over and over. He turns the problem over in his head during class, staring at the back of his classmates' heads, and during training exercises, almost getting knocked out because he's too distracted by the familiar quirks being activated around him. And at night, in his own bed, staring up at the ceiling, unable to sleep. In the end, he blurts it out on the way to an off-campus training exercise. "Do you have any siblings?" If Asui is bothered by the strange, nervous boy in her class that just shouted a question in her face, she doesn't show it. "I do. I have a younger brother and sister." "Younger? Not older?" "No," Asui says evenly. "Midoriya, you're very sweaty, ribbit." Izuku turns to someone else on the bus. "What about you, Kirishima? Siblings?" "Nah, I'm an only child," Kirishima says. "I'm totally jealous, though. I've always wanted siblings to play with. Being an older brother sounds so manly. In the end, my parents only ever had me, though." Izuku jerks to his feet, hands balled up into fists, and shouts, "Does anyone here have siblings?" "Whoa, what's gotten into Midoriya?" Kaminari asks. "Maybe it's nerves?" Kirishima suggests. "I think this is just his personality," Asui says. "He's very enthusiastic, ribbit." No one is answering him, so Izuku barrels on, panic creeping into his tone. "Raise your hand if you have any older siblings." "Yeah, no," Kaminari says. "He's definitely lost it." Obediently, several people raise their hands. Not nearly enough, though. A few people start talking about younger siblings or what it is like being an only child, so Izuku says again, near frantic, "Older cousins?" "What a strange and chaotic energy Midoriya is radiating," Tokoyami says, to no one in particular. A few more people raise their hands. There's still a third of the class missing, though. It's like Izuku is accumulating puzzle pieces of all different shapes and sizes, and none of them match up, all of the clues pointing to a different theory. It makes Izuku's head hurt. From the front of the bus, Aizawa says, "Sit down. We aren't there yet." He barely raises his voice, but Izuku squeaks and sits down so fast his curls bounce around his face. Kirishima reaches around Asui and pats him on the shoulder. His smile is kind, though awkward, like he doesn't know quite how to help the weird boy who takes nonsensical surveys on the way to training simulations, which makes sense. This whole situation must seem crazy from an outside perspective. "Are you okay, Midoriya?" Ashido asks. Izuku nods at her stiffly. "Tone down the energy a little bit," Kaminari advises. Izuku looks away from them just in time to catch Aizawa watching him through the overhead mirror. Izuku had been planning on asking more questions at lunch, but the villain attack ruins that. For the third time in his life, Izuku runs into villains and his childhood friends don't melt out of the shadows to beat them into the ground and whisk Izuku off to safety. This time, it's Izuku that fights for his friends' lives. He half expects to turn and see his classmates as adult counterparts beside him, but he never does. They're all as young and frightened as he is. At one point, Shigaraki reaches for Asui and Izuku goes numb. A part of his brain shuts down, flooded with adrenaline. "Froppy," he chokes out, then, "Smash!" All Might arrives soon after. His classmates slump over or cry out in relief, and it's strange seeing the exhausted hope on the faces of people who have always been the ones to save him. A few days after the USJ attack, Izuku is pulled aside by two people. The first is Asui. She corners him in the cafeteria. "You called me Froppy," she says. Izuku avoids looking her in the eye, gripping his lunch tray like a shield. "What? No, I didn't." "Yesterday, when the villain with the decaying quirk was reaching for me." Asui watches him evenly. She's too observant. She can probably see every drop of sweat beating at his temples. "You said Froppy. How did you know my hero name?" "Your what?" Izuku asks, strangled. "Froppy." She says it so casually, Izuku almost doesn't understand at first. "I decided I wanted my hero name to be Froppy when I was a kid. I've never told anyone here that. How did you know?" "I didn't," Izuku says, trying to keep his voice steady. You must have misheard." "I didn't mishear," Asui says. "It was very traumatic. It was hard to make sense of what happened." With that, Izuku turns on his heel and flees. Asui doesn't chase him, but she does watch him during class, like she's waiting for him to explode. Izuku pretends not to see. He does feel a little bit like he will explode every time he sees her staring at him from the corner of his eye. Aizawa returns to teaching a few days after the attack, swathed in bandages. He doesn't have any trouble keeping them all in line, even with his injuries. After the bell rings at the end of the day, Aizawa dismisses the class and then says, "Midoriya, stay behind." Izuku gathers his things and stands in front of Aizawa. "You're acting strange," Aizawa begins. "More strange than any 15-year-old should be acting. You're constantly unbalanced by your classmates, and I keep catching you staring at them like you're waiting for something to happen. At first, I thought you had poor social skills, but that's not it. You were odd yesterday, too. More odd than usual." His eyes bore straight into Izuku's. He wonders if Aizawa's stare seems heavier than most people's because his quirk is located in his eyes, or if that's just the kind of person Aizawa is. "Explain," Aizawa says. Izuku says. "Don't lie to me," Aizawa says before Izuku can think of an excuse. "Did you know about the villain attack before it happened?" "No!" Izuku realizes how bad this must seem, acting suspicious in the week before villains infiltrated a high-security school. It's hard to explain." "Try." Izuku dries his sweaty palms on his uniform blazer, swallows, and then begins. "When I was 5, I was almost attacked by a villain, and 2 heroes jumped in to save me. Those 2 heroes were Uraraka and Todoroki." "Excuse me?" Aizawa says. "A few months later," Izuku continues, "I was attacked again. 3 heroes saved me before the villain could touch me. It was Ashido, Kaminari, and Sero. Then Ida saved me from a runaway truck, and Asui and Uraraka saved me from drowning, and then Tokoyami and Shoji saved me sometime after that. The average person only has 2 or 3 encounters with villains in their life, but I've had half a dozen every year since I was little. For 10 years, villains have been trying to attack me, and heroes have been jumping in to save me. Heroes that look like..." Izuku scrubs a hand through his hair. Aizawa isn't looking at him like he wants to string him up anymore, but Izuku still squirms under his dark-eyed stare. "After so many villain attacks, why weren't you placed in witness protection?" Aizawa asks. "That's the thing," Izuku says. "I never talked to the police. The heroes never recorded these events. And every time I would go home and look up the heroes that saved me, and I've never come across any record that says they exist. Until I came here." "What do you mean?" Izuku wets his lips. Putting it into words makes the whole thing real, even if it must sound crazy to someone who hasn't lived it. "The others in my class, it's them. Every one of them, aside from Mineta, are the heroes that saved me." "The heroes that saved you," Aizawa says. "How old were they?" "In their late 20s, I think," Izuku says. "And your theory?" Aizawa says. Izuku hesitates. He wets his lips again and says, "Time travel." Aizawa doesn't flinch away, even though Izuku feels like he's unraveling. This is a truth that Izuku has been too scared to say out loud, to even write down, because then he would have to consider it, really consider it, rather than shoving it deep down whenever the thought crossed his mind. It's insane, but it's the only explanation that makes sense. "You were visited by 18 heroes?" Aizawa asks. 19. 1 is missing." "Who?" Aizawa says. "A hero with a brainwashing quirk. He might have just been an underground hero, but I'm fairly familiar with underground heroes and I've never seen anyone mention a hero like him. And he referenced the other heroes too, so I know that they all know each other." Aizawa is silent. Izuku fidgets, fingers curling and uncurling in the hem of his blazer. Aizawa leans back against his desk. Izuku gets the impression that he would be rubbing at his temples if both his arms weren't bound in slings. Finally, Aizawa says, "Fuck." Izuku jumps. "Sir?" "Don't repeat this to anyone," Aizawa says. "The time traveling or my swearing." "So it is then?" Izuku's heart is beating quickly. It feels like it might thud right out of his chest. "It's time travel. My classmates they're really time traveling? Breathe, Midoriya." Izuku sucks in a sharp inhale. I'm sorry, sir." "Don't apologize," Aizawa says. "I imagine this is overwhelming, but don't stress yourself out over it. It's out of our hands regardless. So long as you don't reveal any information to others, especially your classmates, and you don't go out of your way to change the timeline, everything will be okay. Change the timeline? Izuku repeats, feeling weak. You're not the chaotic type. Aizawa pauses and then corrects himself. Not the chaotic evil type, rather. Everything will be fine. He bids Izuku goodbye and sends him on his way. Aizawa still looks tired, though. More tired than usual. As Izuku leaves, he hears Aizawa mumble under his breath. This class is going to be the death of me. Izuku remembers the Ice Prince being composed, cool, but never cold. Todoroki barely looks at Izuku, and when he does, it's distant, like he is calculating Izuku's worth and finding him wanting. Izuku is stood in the doorway before class. He watches Kirishima and Kaminari talk to Kacchan. Kaminari looks as though he's poking a sleeping bear and enjoying every minute twitch of Kacchan's eye, while Kirishima genuinely seems to be enjoying Kacchan's presence. It's not that Kaminari doesn't enjoy Kacchan's presence, of course, but Kirishima brightens under Kacchan's gaze like a flower tipping their face to the sun. Izuku thinks he could recognize them as red and grenades from that look alone. To his credit, Kacchan doesn't push either of them away. There are a few members of their class that Kacchan seems to have endless patience for. He doesn't notice how long he's been standing there, until Todoroki says from behind him, "You're blocking the doorway. Move." Izuku jumps out of the way, almost tripping over his own feet, and Todoroki breezes past him without a second glance. It's a little rude, sure, but for most of his school life, Izuku has dealt with much worse. For some reason, though, Izuku is left staring after Todoroki's retreating back, throat closing up. Todoroki is different to the Ice Prince. Izuku could let that get to him. He could take this as a sign of broken friendship and give up, but then he has never been very good at giving up, even when everyone else tells him that he should. Instead, Izuku leans against the doorway, watches Todoroki breeze through the crowd of his classmates like he's untouchable and thinks, "How did this happen?" And then, "How do I fix it?" Izuku invites Todoroki to sit with them during lunch, but Todoroki rebuffs him. His stare chills Izuku right through. He is still getting used to his friends not knowing who he is and starting years-old relationships from the beginning again. It hurts to see one of his first friends look at him like he's a bug. It's not just his quirk that is cold, no? Aoyama leans against the counter to Izuku's left. He's swirling juice in a wine glass. Some of it spills over the lip of the glass and stains his white button-up. He pinches it between two fingers. Merde. Have you ever considered swearing in English? Izuku asks. Aoyama looks up at him. Pardon? Nothing, Izuku says. Izuku doesn't know how to get juice stains out of a white shirt, but maybe his classmates do. Uraraka says that Ida carries more fatherly energy than all their upperclassmen put together. He can't get through to Todoroki, but he's not the only person in their class of 20. He's not the only friend that Izuku needs to grow close to again. Hey, Aoyama, Izuku says. Would you like to eat lunch with us? Aoyama lights up. He lets go of his shirt and bounces on his pointed heels, ruined shirt forgotten. Yes, I would love to. Aoyama seems to remember himself. He stops bouncing and coughs into his fist, pushing his hair out of his eyes. I mean, sure, if you want me there, I suppose it would be impolite to refuse. Izuku grabs his wrist and tugs him towards the table he shares with his friends. Come on then, maybe we can ask the others about your shirt. Aoyama goes shy under Izuku's touch. His friends seem baffled by Aoyama's presence at first, but make him feel welcome anyway. Floaty Girl, Almost Ingenium, and Froppy were often seen in each other's company, but Prince Charming often came alone. Izuku had never seen him with these three heroes. Prince Charming said it was because he preferred to work on his own and soak up the spotlight for himself, and Izuku believed him, but seeing him animatedly talking about hero costumes and listening to Ida's advice about getting stains out of white clothes, going so far as to take out his phone to take notes, it settles something in his stomach. This is right. This is how his friends should be, happy and thriving, together. Izuku has been looking for the operator. He thinks Aizawa knows that, but he hasn't said anything to stop him or assisted Izuku in his task. Since their conversation a few days after the USJ attack, Aizawa hasn't said anything else about time travel to Izuku, but sometimes Izuku will catch Aizawa staring at him from across the classroom or the training field with an unreadable expression. If the operator was somewhere on campus, if he had tried out for the hero course like the rest of them, Aizawa might know. It's possible that All Might knows too. He was one of the examiners, after all. He might know of a brainwashing quirk. But Izuku doesn't want to share this with them. He wouldn't be able to explain to All Might why he needed to know, and there's something about the way that Aizawa watches him that tells Izuku that this is something he has to do for himself. It's not Aizawa's task. It's his. Izuku hovers outside of Class 1B's room for a few days until Monoma is even more worked up than usual and keeps trying to pick fights with him at lunchtime. Izuku doesn't recognize any of the Class 1B students. Disappointing, but not surprising. He goes home and brainstorms as he lifts weights with one hand. The operator is the only missing hero. If Kachan is grenades, and at this point Izuku is certain that he is, then every other single hero is accounted for and in the same class. Class 1A is comprised of Izuku, 18 baby-faced versions of his childhood friends, and Mineta. Izuku definitely never met anyone like Mineta when he was younger. If it was someone like Tokoyami that was missing, then Izuku might have thought that they were working from the shadows and never ran into Izuku, but Mineta isn't that kind of hero. From what Izuku has seen, Mineta isn't any kind of hero at all. The pieces start slotting together. One missing hero, and one unhero-like student, and one teacher that has expelled hundreds of students in the past. Sir, Izuku says to Aizawa the next day during a lull in hero training. How often do hero classes get new students? Not often, Aizawa says. But it can happen? Yes, if there's a space open and the student in question has proven themselves worthy of being transferred into the hero course. Transferred, Izuku repeats, nearly vibrating with excitement. His hand itches for a pen. Transferred from another department? Aizawa eyes him with suspicion. It's a familiar look these days. Aizawa always seems to be waiting for Izuku to do something, though Izuku hasn't worked out exactly what that something is. If students from general education prove themselves, they can be transferred into the hero course, Aizawa says. General education, Izuku repeats. How could he have been so blind? He's watched the sports festival since he was little. He's seen the general education students scrambling after the hero course, desperate to snatch a few minutes in the spotlight for themselves, and he knows the operator. He's written pages and pages theorizing about his quirk. It works on people. The entrance exam had been full of robots. The operator was supposed to be in Class 1A with the rest of the 18 other budding heroes, but he wasn't accepted because of his quirk, so he must have settled for the next best option, general education. Thanks, sir, Izuku says. He spins around, but before he can run off to speed through his training, and then, after the bell, race deeper into campus to find the other departments, Aizawa yanks him back by the hood. Don't go meddling with things, Aizawa says. Remember what I said. I remember. Aizawa scans his face, looking for some hint of a lie, before releasing him. Problem child. Go practice with the rest of your classmates, and don't go sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. Yes, sir. At lunchtime, Uraraka sighs and slumps into her seat. Her chin rests on Izuku's shoulder, but she's looking beyond him, at something on the other side of the cafeteria. Izuku glances over his shoulder. Asui is waiting in the food line with Hagakure. Her hair is done up in twin buns. She's smiling. You should tell her, Izuku says. Uraraka jumps up like she's been burnt and clasps her hands to her face. Beneath her fingers, her cheeks flush pink. What? Tell who? I have no idea what you're talking about. You should tell Asui that you like her, Izuku says. I bet she'd return your feelings. Sorry, sensei, Izuku thinks. I had to interfere here, just a little bit. Uraraka is my best friend. Uraraka peers at him through the slats of her fingers. Why do you think that? Just a hunch, Izuku says. In the end, the operator seeks out their class without being prompted. Depending on the results of the sports festival, he says, bracketed by stone-faced students from other departments, they'll consider our transfer into the hero course, and it seems like they may also transfer people out. Uraraka and Ida gulp beside him, intimidated by that idea, by the ice in the operator's eyes, but Izuku has to stop himself from pushing past his classmates and jumping on the operator in excitement. Something tells him that he's not here to make friends, not with anyone in the hero course anyway. But the operator has a plan. He's coming. He hasn't given up. Izuku doesn't know what will happen when all 19 of his friends are in the one place. He just knows that it needs to happen. Izuku takes a deep breath and steps forward. He says, trying to ignore the way everyone's eyes dart to him. I'm Midoriya Izuku. Pleased to meet you. Let's be friends. Everyone around them splutters. Somewhere to his left, Kaminari calls, Oi, Midoriya, don't make friends with the guy that just dropped a declaration of war on us. I'm not going to go easy on you just because you try to play nice, says the operator. Izuku shakes his head. No, I don't want you to go easy on us. Try your hardest. Don't give up until your dreams are realized. But, in the meanwhile, I'd like for us to be friends. In this class, we're already competitors. When we're heroes, we'll be aiming for the same top spots. We don't go easy on one another, but we're still friends. Ashita groans. Midoriya, no fair. You can't keep showing us up with that hero attitude. That was so manly, Kirishima says, sniffling. The true spirit of heroism. Izuku doesn't look away from the operator, but he can feel his cheeks redden at their comments. The operator doesn't look away, either. He's tall. Izuku remembers him being tall, but he had half expected that to be a product of his child mind, when every adult seemed to loom over him, but it wasn't. The operator stands half a head taller than the other students, and he will only grow with age. I don't want to hold hands and skip through the flowers with you, he says at last. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to win. You can do both, Izuku says. The operator scoffs and turns away, but Izuku isn't discouraged. So long as the operator doesn't give up, so long as he holds tight to his dream and works to be transferred into Class 1A, then it will all work out. They have almost 3 years of high school left. Izuku will make friends with them all before he graduates. This, he vows. Izuku is so wrung out by his encounter with the operator, his encounter with all of them over the weeks they've been at UA, that he sits down next to Kirishima at lunchtime, grabs his wrist, and shoves his hand into his hair. Kirishima says, flexing his fingers against Izuku's scalp. Are you feeling alright, dude? UA is very stressful, Izuku says honestly. Kirishima considers this, then shrugs. You're definitely right about that. Kirishima threads his fingers obediently through Izuku's curls, pushing his fringe out of his face again and again. Izuku leans into the touch like a cat. His eyes slip closed. He feels like red. He is red. A big, warm hand, solid and real, that's so gentle pushing through Izuku's hair, making him feel safe. On the other side of the table, Kaminari says, Is Midoriya okay? I don't know, man, Kirishima says. But I mean, UA is pretty insane. I don't blame him for getting overwhelmed and nervous. Midoriya has always been kind of weird, Sero says. So, hey, Kirishima says, don't be like that. This kind of thing is what friends are for. Friends, Izuku thinks sleepily. Kirishima and the others, both the adult and teenage versions, are his friends. Izuku tries to wave at the operator at the starting line of the sports festival, but he turns away from him with a roll of his eyes. Izuku doesn't have time to worry about that, though. He has to prove to the world, to All Might, to himself, that he deserves to be here. When the final competition is one-on-one fights and Izuku is pitted against the operator, Shinso Hitoshi, it feels like fate. When Todoroki pulls him into a tunnel and pours out his heart, it feels even more so. The pieces are falling into place. Both boys don't like him at the moment, but that's okay. Izuku has a rough idea of how to help them now. He can work with that. It's hard to listen to Shinso's words. Izuku knows what it's like to lag behind everyone else because he doesn't have the right quirk, or have a quirk at all. But Shinso is right. Izuku has been blessed. He's been blessed by other people. All Might, and his mum, and all the kind, brave people in his class. He's been blessed from that very first moment 10 years ago when he was saved by heroes, when Ice Prince and Floaty Girl, Todoroki and Uraraka, pulled him out of danger. Shinso is counted in that number, even if he doesn't know it yet. Izuku has to do something to repay him. Shinso! Izuku calls when the match is over. His throbbing hand is cradled to his chest, and the arena still echoes with the screams of the audience. Shinso doesn't pause. He doesn't look at Izuku. Izuku trails after him. Shinso, wait! He stops, finally. He glares at Izuku over his shoulder, but there's no real heat in it. He just looks tired. What do you want? You've already won. You can do it, Izuku says. You can be a hero. I don't need pity from the golden child. Golden child? Izuku draws in a deep breath and forges on. No, I mean it. It might not have gotten you into the hero course, but there are loads of pro heroes that wouldn't have been able to pass the entrance exam either, like Eraserhead and Midnight, and you can do so much with it. You can halt villains in their tracks. No other hero can do that. You can integrate criminals, get them to reveal their plans. You can free hostages without putting anyone in danger, and you can calm crowds of panicking people, and... Stop. A vein of tension runs through Shinso's voice. I don't need your help. Why are you telling me this? I know you can do it. He knows this better than he could ever say. I guess I want to see that. I want to see that kind of hero come into being. It'd be awesome to work with that kind of hero. And, Izuku scrubs at the back of his head and accidentally smears blood along his uniform collar. I meant what I said last week. I want to be friends. Present Mike is calling for them to clear the field, and up ahead, the general education students are leaning over the railing, beckoning for Shinso to come to them. Izuku's friends are somewhere behind him. He needs to go and visit Recovery Girl so he'll be ready for his upcoming match against Todoroki. Izuku balls his good hand into a fist and says, Shinso. Shinso blows out a breath. Are all of you hero kids this exhausting? We're a handful, yes, but I've been told that I'm a special case. Plus ultra, right? I don't think that's what the school motto means, Shinso says. He turns, just enough for Izuku to see his glare melting into what could be called a smile. He still looks tired, but Izuku remembers the bags under the operator's eyes, the exhausted twist of his lips, and thinks that it might just be a part of him, the same as All Might's bright smile and Uraraka's perpetual cheer. Izuku resists the urge to shuffle his feet. Then, friends? Shinso looks him up and down. Maybe. I'll see you around, Midoriya. And then he strides off the field and gets swept up in his celebrating classmates. Izuku bounds off the field. He has to weather a lecture from Recovery Girl about his fingers and figure out how to break through Todoroki's walls, and then, once the sports festival is over, follow through with his promise of friendship with Shinso, but he can see the cogs turning. It's happening. It's not sure what it is, but it's happening. Mom is crying when Izuku comes home. He had expected that. He saw her readying the living room before he left for school, stacking tissue boxes and water bottles on the coffee table like a soldier preparing to go to war. He hadn't expected to see one of his battered hero journals laying open in her lap, though. Izuku, Mom says when he closes the door behind him. Izuku, I'm so sorry. This is the second time I didn't believe you. Mom, Izuku starts. It took me a while to realize why all your classmates looked so familiar, but then I went into your room and... Mom holds up a page close to the back where Izuku's newest notes are, the ones he made at the beginning of the semester. Time travel? I'm sorry for not telling you. Inko rounds the couch and pulls him into a hug. Her face is wet. He can feel it through his shirt, and he holds on to her tightly. I'm sorry, Mom says wetly. All this time you were trying to tell me about these heroes and I thought they were imaginary. Oh, Izuku, I'm so sorry. It's okay. I know it sounds ridiculous. She's shaking, just slightly, even as she holds on to him so fiercely that he doesn't think he could pull away, even with his newfound strength. She must be overwhelmed. Izuku has lived with this for years and dealt with the realization for weeks. Mom has only known about it for a day, a few hours. You were in so much danger, Mom says, choked up with tears. All this time, and these people saved you. They saved you. I have to thank them. You have to invite them over so I can thank them for looking after you for so many years. They don't know, Izuku says. They're 16, like me. The heroes I met were adults in their 20s, at least. Mum pushes him back, holds him at shoulder length. Then, when they're adults, when they know, you invite them over and I'll throw a dinner party. Promise me. I promise, Izuku says. End of Chapter 2. Part 2. Podfic's notes. Ah, the reveal. Izuku's finally figured it out. I really love this part of the fic, not least of all because we get to meet Shinso, who's one of my personal favorites, but also because of the context there, that Izuku's realizing that, hey, I recognize all of them but Mineta. And the line about, from what Izuku's seen, Mineta isn't any kind of hero at all. Spot on, perfect. Mineta is probably like my biggest obstacle to enjoying canon. It's awful. There's some fics I've read that have done some pretty interesting things with him, but in general, no, don't care for him. Get him out of here. So for Izuku to realize that and just immediately jump on board to, oh, yeah, let's get Shinso in here instead. Love it. I also really love Inko finding out where this is something that, I mean, she's seen these journals and thought it was imaginary friends. I try to imagine what that realization must have been like how long it took her before she realized, no, this can't be a coincidence, that these are all real. That's something that I like about this chapter too. Also, Asui and Uraraka are so cute, and I love that little tidbit in here. Izuku is, like Aizawa said, definitely not chaotic evil, but I would not say he's not chaotic. I would say he's probably one of the most chaotic. And him playing matchmaker is really cute. Thanks for joining.